Hey, welcome to the podcast, Giovanna.
Trey,
Trey.
thank you.
My bad.
Yes, a lot has changed since we first met years ago. And I'll go into a little bit about why I kind of shortened my name, but for the most part, it's always a conversation starter too, with
Mhm.
introducing myself as Trevana, the pronunciation. Some people may get it. Then I have to explain, hey, remember like Trayvon Martin? My name is
Mm.
Trayvana,
Mm.
but let's just do Trey. So
Gotcha. That makes sense.
yeah,
Awesome. And
yeah.
to go on that note, I like to always ask this question: Who do you say you are?
So I say that I am a child of the Most High. So everything that I am, everything that I have, I give all credit to Yahweh. I am a person who is very transparent, but I'm also a person who is growing and trying to be a better person every single day. I'm also an entrepreneur. I am an associate real estate broker, and I'm originally from California.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Well, I was gonna say on that note, tell me a little bit more about Cali because I guess as I met you and as you still are, you are also Mrs. Hudson. That's how we were able
Houston.
to connect. Houston.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
getting all the names wrong. It's like
It's
I'll
okay.
let
You want to be a whole nother person.
but
um,
tell me about Cali. How did you go from Cali to Georgia?
well, that was all God again, because I never imagined myself living here in Georgia. I'm originally, again, from Los Angeles, California, specifically South Central Los Angeles. And there is a song by, I think it's Snoop Dogg and Katy Perry, I think. It says California girls, we're unforgettable. We are. But I'm a true California girl. I've lived there my entire life, up until I moved to Las Vegas. So a little bit about that. I grew up in South Central Los Angeles. It was very rough neighborhood. I lived with my dad and my grandmother. My mom was addicted to drugs and she left me at the age of 5. My dad got sick probably about the age of 10, and I became like his in-home nurse. So for a lot of my younger years, I pretty much took care of my dad. And it taught me a lot. I grew up, I think, a little fast. I was also a little bad. I once my father passed away when I was 12, I was actually in the same room when he passed away. He just had a lot of health challenges, and my dad was also a pastor. But I learned a lot in that too, because my dad was addicted to drugs, along with my mom, and I kind of found that out. And that's one of the things when you talk about when people say, oh, they look at pastors and they make certain judgments. You're not supposed to follow the pastor. They're still human.
Mm.
They're people just like we are. So a lot of things happened in my life. So I wasn't like raised in the church. I kind of separated myself.
Mhm.
And as I was my younger years after my father passed away, I learned that he was not my biological father. And as a result of that, his mother, who I was living with, I became again a little rebellious, and I ran away from home, and then I ended up living in a group home, and then a foster home, because I was a little bad and I didn't want to follow rules.
Mhm.
And so um, after I went through those challenges, I did get on the straight and narrow at some point in my life and graduated from high school, went to a community college where I got my associate's degree, lived in Cali for a little bit longer. And it's a struggle. People that still live in Cali, I don't know why, how, it's very expensive to live. And I was living check to check. eventually I moved to Las Vegas because I have a sister that lives there. She was born and raised, and moved up there for a little while, where I got into real estate. It was vacation ownership or timeshare. However, we were selling a deed and a title. So that's how I got into like the real estate industry. I loved it. I love meeting people from all over the world, connecting, explaining a product as if the same way that I would want somebody to explain to me. So I'm not a
Mhm.
salesperson. I'm more of a person who will explain to you how something works. And I call
Yeah.
myself, even today, a real estate advisor, not
Mhm.
a salesperson. I lived there for a few years after I was, had passed 30 or approaching 30. I was like, okay, Vegas gotta go. It was just, very fast paced. It's very transient. People move there, move away. And I was like, okay, I need to settle down. And um, there was a guy that was interested in dating me, but he lived here in Georgia.
Mhm.
And the housing market had crashed during that time in 2008. And I couldn't sell a vacation ownership for nothing. So I was like, what you do now? So the guy asked me if I would move here, but I was planning to move to Florida. And he said, well, he would move to Florida too if I just gave him my opportunity. And I said, well, you know where you live in Georgia, I'll just stop there. If it doesn't work, then
Mhm.
I'll just move over to Florida. Moved here. It didn't work, but I did find my husband. So, after that, I went back to school, got my bachelor's degree, got married, and then started full time in real estate. And I'm, going over a little bit, skipping a bunch of stuff, but we can fill those things in. But it has definitely been I think even one thing you mentioned earlier, some of the different things that you went through over the last couple of years, it's just
Mhm.
life. We go through these life experiences, some good, some are bad, but it's those challenges and those steps that you take to get to that next level. You can look back and say, oh, I wish I hadn't did that, but it makes you who you are today. So I'm grateful for those challenges that I experienced, and who I am today and who I will become, because we're always, the Michelle Obama book, becoming, we're always becoming something.
Man, I like it. I
Mhm.
guess kind of to fill in the blanks, going back to like being that younger girl and kind of finding out slowly the truths about your life and like your family and things like that. What was that like? Was it just like a friend or like a family of the friend that was just like, well, I'll tell you one thing this year for your next birthday, I'll give you like another dose of reality, or like what was that experience like for you?
So no, it was my cousin, talking about me, saying, you don't even know who your daddy is. So one of those things where, because everyone in my family was probably, your complexion or a little darker. And here I am looking like this. And yes, my hair is dyed, but it is, naturally curly and this tone. And so growing up, like I didn't see this face that everybody else sees. I thought I was like, darks, I didn't have this image. So when people like sometimes pause and they just like stare at me like, oh my God, you're so beautiful, I don't really see, I'm not the girl that stares in the mirror. I'm not about like myself because of the way that I was raised. And I think that's more of a challenge that I'm trying to overcome today so that I can be more comfortable getting in front of a camera, talking to other people, because this is what life is about now,
Yeah.
the social realm. I'm more of a one-on-one, face-to-face type of person. I like energy and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
so what happened was my cousin, she would say certain things growing up, and of course, and then other people would ask too, like, what are you mixed with? And I was like, I don't know. I would say something like, two people got together and made me, like, I don't know. And
Yeah.
so and it really didn't bother me much. And then the major one was my grandfather. Actually, we went out to eat one time, and I remember him saying, like, did you ever find out who your dad was? And I was like, wait, what? Once he said
Mm.
it, it was like really like solid. And I
Yeah.
asked my mom one time when she came by to visit, and she was like, girl, that's your daddy. And I'm like, oh God, here she go lying too,
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and maybe she didn't know. I mean, I don't know, but clearly if you saw her
Yeah.
and him and then you saw me, you was like, come on, like, so, she passed away as well when I was about 21, but I wasn't as affected with her death
Mhm,
than I was with my father because I was living with my father much
mm,
closer to him. But I was the next of kin for her. So I had to go and identify the body, and I was about 21
mm.
ish. I had to go and identify the body. And then also, she had cancer. She passed away from cancer.
Yeah.
And then I have to also pay for the services. And I was like, I don't even really know her, but I did learn a lot about her after she passed away. And it kind of opened my eyes to just realizing probably how she got addicted to drugs, how she probably felt when she lost her kids, not knowing where they were, and just a lot about her life that made me more sympathetic to who she was and what she probably went through.
Mm. That that's a good point. I guess the um the point you make about having sympathy for other people, it's one of those things that doesn't seem to come up unless you experience something or you witness something. So like just like you were saying, talking about growing up being a bad kid or being rebellious or maybe running
Mhm.
with the wrong crowds and then being to take away from that maybe, okay, like I could see how someone would go this route or that route versus just
Right,
like, oh, you just being bad.
right.
Like you shouldn't do bad. Like just do right, do better.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
that really doesn't connect with anyone unless you can kind of be like, well, it's not it's not out of the question that you would maybe look to numb a pain if it's something you don't know how to deal with in a better way.
Yeah. And it's always things that, we can learn from our past or share with somebody else who may be going through the same experience or getting ready to head through there because um at one point I was the bad crowd, like, so and I can see how even my mom probably got caught up with the wrong crowd because how do you just start on drugs? You don't just go somewhere and they just decide, hey, I'm just gonna start doing drugs. Somebody
Mhm.
introduces it to you, and
Yeah.
then they say, hey, won't you try this because they've experienced it. And
Mhm.
9 times out of 10, it's your friend. You don't get it from anywhere.
Mhm.
Nobody just says, I mean, unless it's probably like a drug dealer, just starting out and they're like, hey, try this so you can tell me how it is, because I think I've seen something like that, like on a movie or something. But for the most part, people get introduced to things because of the people that they're surrounded with. And I'm so thankful again to just the people who did come into my life and then the Holy Spirit that led those people and just being in my life that got me on a different path because I could have been down a whole another path. We would not be on this podcast. So yeah, I just, sometimes like if I'm just thinking about how my life could have been, I'm just so thankful for her, where I am today and how I got here, even the struggles. So yep. I think for me, I've always worked, I've always been independent. So it's even hard like being married
Mhm.
to, kind of be dependent, I would say, at some point.
Mhm.
And then also, just being able to like express more of my feelings and have conversations and stuff like that. So yeah.
Yeah. I guess even like to that point of like wanting to move towards marriage, like how did you I guess what kind of led to you being like, okay, like LA is enough, let me go to Vegas. Vegas is enough, let me go to Georgia and just like this isn't working, but let me try something else that may or may not work.
So while I was in California, what happened was I had just, like after high school, I had started working at the airport, but I was working at night so I could go to school in the morning. So, and because my mom had left and I was a ward of the court, which is, where you have a social worker and they do like monthly visits. Um, I was granted support. So through schooling. So most people don't take advantage of it. I was like, free, just submit your little book allowance, and college was much cheaper than it is now. But again, I started at a community college.
Mhm.
And so I was like, okay, I can do that because from the neighborhood that I was from, you don't see a lot of people go to college. It just wasn't a thing that was just like praised upon, but I was like, well, I'll just go ahead and do it. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was like, I'll take just the general courses and do a liberal arts study just so that I can take advantage of this. So I was working at night and then I would do the thing about the airport is they close at a certain time. So I was able to do my homework during certain hours and then the airport opens up. And then I was able to go to class in the morning. And what happened was I had applied, I was going to be a nurse because guess what? I took care of my father. So
Mhm.
everybody in the family was like, oh, you'll be a great nurse. They make so much money and blah, blah, blah. And so I was like, yeah. So I went to apply for the RN program, registered nurse program.
Mhm.
And if anybody who has ever applied for one, you can be on a waiting list or they would do a lottery. And so I applied for several different schools and they had different programs where you would either be on a waiting list or it would be a lottery program. Lo and behold, I was randomly selected the very first time that I applied. I was like, oh my God, right? But
Yeah.
I had just made a major change in my life where I had switched jobs. So now I was like on a schedule that required me to work from like morning like the daytime shift versus like a afternoon shift.
Right.
And so not only did I do that, I did
Mhm.
one of the most dumbest things that I always tell people not to do. Don't move into a place that you can't afford by yourself. So I moved in with a person, and I had to still contribute to the portion of the rent. And I just couldn't go to the program was daytime. And it was like, well, what you gonna do? So I was like, well, I can't let this opportunity pass me. So I quit the job. I did have, well, I didn't have no money, but I was, I would have been like the other person could have afforded to pay it,
Mhm.
right? So I was like, only thing I had really was my car note at that time. And I said, I can get a job at night again, doing something like what I did before. So I could study, maybe like a security type job where I can study and then go to school in the morning, and go to school in the morning. And the school actually recommended that you don't do that because you need all of your time to like study because it's a very hard program. And
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I should be able to do it, And I struggled. Oh my God, I barely passed the first semester. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to take a break, you know, um, you know, and then I'll get back into the nursing program. So after the first semester, I just had to figure this out. I had to move out of that place because I couldn't afford it by myself. And I literally, Asher, like this was the moment in my life where I thought to myself,
Mhm.
wow, this is how people go homeless, right? Because like I had to break the lease, but I didn't have the money to break the lease. It was gonna go on my credit. I was like, oh my God. And then I didn't have anything because I had sold like most of my furniture from my first apartment that I had, and all the stuff was the other person's stuff. And I was like, oh my God, like, but when I tell you that thought lasted all of like 5 seconds, because it was
Mhm.
like the spirit spoke to me, was like, no, you're not. You're just gonna have to start all over again. I can visualize myself sleeping on the floor, like building back up. And
Mhm.
I was like, okay. And when I tell you, like, I kid you not, maybe like the next day or the next week, I can't remember exactly because I don't pay attention to certain things, which I should, because things like this happen all the time, for me at least. I got like a random check in the mail for like $5,000 from my car loan company. It was like a holiday loan that they were giving out. And I was like, what? $5,000? I was like, I can use this for anything? I called them. They were like, you can use it for anything. I was like, what? So I was able to break the lease. I was able to have a company come and move the furniture out of the place and put it
Yeah.
in storage. And so there was a friend of family friend that had like a a room that I could stay in until I figured out my next step. But when I tell you, like, the room was probably like a little bit bigger than a large closet, like
Hmm.
literally just had a bed. I had my clothes like around, like, and then a walkway to get out of the room. Like, it was so small, but it was going to be enough for me to figure this out. Right. But I was like, at that moment, I said, I'm never going to worry about anything. I just know God got me, like, I'm not worrying about nothing. And so what I did was I took that money,
Hmm.
broke the lease. My best friend, she was living in Belize at the time. I took a trip because I had never been out the country, went to Belize, and I bought some rims for my car because I was young. I was young, so I bought some rims for my car. And I went to Belize, and I think I stayed there for maybe like a week or so. And when I got back, I was like, okay, what am I gonna do? And I know that I had been to like Las Vegas to visit my sister a couple of times, and my sister, we're very different. My sister's very sensitive. She's very, very I'm caring. Let me don't say that I'm different, but she is very sensitive. Whereas I've grown up a little bit more tougher, making sure that, things are in order. And
Hmm.
but when I would go and visit my sister, like, she would cry at the thought of me even just leaving to go back home. Like, oh my God, why you won't stay? So you know what? I was like, I'm gonna go and move up there. And I had talked to her, and she was like, of course, so moved in with her. We ended up getting a space together. And then that's how I actually transitioned to Las Vegas. And that's actually where because those other years from me leaving my grandmother's house, living in a group home, living in a foster home, being in my early 20s and partying like a rock star, I didn't go to nobody's church. I probably went with somebody every now and then, because they went, but wasn't into it. Even when I moved to Las Vegas, there was a guy that I was talking to at the time, and he invited me to his church, and I was like, oh God, here we go, another one. So I was like, I'll go to visit your church. And when I
Yeah.
went to the church, I fell in love with the pastor because he was talking about, like, he wasn't one of those pastors that was like you and thou and thus, and he was talking like we, me, like, it was just real life stuff that I could relate to, and I could
Yeah.
say, oh, okay, and it was awesome. So I actually started um, teaching the children's church, and I was going to a Sunday church,
Hmm.
and I just fell in love. Like, I got baptized there. So in Sin City is where I just really fell in love with Christ, and started to develop a relationship with him there.
Man, that's a great that's a great way how you presented that, because it's amazing to see, like, what gets you to where you are. And
Mhm.
you don't really, for me at least, I've been able to kind of use the podcast as a way to, like, document my process, so to speak, and, like, being able to have conversations with different people. It's been interesting to see how other people do life. But, like, to your point of um going through those things and then just being like, okay, like, I'll figure something else. I'll try a program. Maybe it doesn't work. I'll do
Mhm.
this, do that. Like, I'll live a little bit. But then, like,
Mhm.
when an opportunity comes up to kind of like change or pivot, like, you took that opportunity and you didn't, maybe it speaks to your personality. You didn't, like, rest on your laurels, so to speak. Like, when it was time to get moving, you, like, got up and went with the flow.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. You got to go with the flow.
Yeah.
I think sometimes people, and it's not bad to like overthink things, or try to make sure that you're cautious when you're making decisions. However, sometimes you just really have to go with the flow, or you pray for guidance and direction on those things that you can't. And then sometimes, for me, to be honest with you, I may just flip a coin and I pray over the coin, like, Lord, please, which one is heavy? Oh, but yeah.
Yeah. Hey, that's honest though, because it's like sometimes I think the other thing that I'm finding to be helpful is keeping things simple, because it's like in trying to complicate things too much and try to make it more than it is, or try to appear smarter than I might be in a situation. It's like, no, no, we don't need all that.
Right,
Just
right.
just do like the bare necessities, so to speak.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yep. And then and that kind of brings into the next segment of me leaving Las Vegas, because again, I was getting ready to move. I just didn't know where. I wasn't going back to California. And um a lot of people were moving to Florida because that's like timeshare capital of the world. Mickey never gets old. So, I was like, okay, I could possibly do that. Or I was thinking of Texas as well. And the reason why I really was staying in California was to be closer to like my brothers. And I have some family there, not very much, but it was really draining in California. So for me, it was more of a shift. So once I did that move, it was like, okay, now I can move, somewhere else, and I know I'll be okay by myself, so I didn't have that fear of going. And again, like my first trip out of the country, even when I went to my friend in Belize,
Yeah.
it was by myself. And then another time when I was turning 30, actually, I think maybe, yeah, I can't remember which one was the first one, but another trip I took out of the country that was like a first by myself was to
Mhm.
Jamaica, because I think it was my 29th birthday. I had never really been anywhere like on a vacation.
Mhm.
And I had started making all this money. Like I made a lot of money when I was in Vegas. Where I wasn't living check to check. It was the
Yeah.
first time I was like, I could walk in any store and just buy what I want. I was like, I'm rich. And then I got to a point where I was like, wait a minute, why am I spending like $30 for one shirt? I was like, wait, let me take myself back down. Because it was ridiculous, and that's all I can see. Like some people, when they get into money, like they start to go and buy like crazy stuff. And I'm like, wait a
Yeah.
minute, like, so I kind of, I'm very modest and I would say frugal
Mhm.
when it comes to certain things, because I just, you can get crazy in stuff,
Mhm.
and our life is not about stuff. We can have all these things. It's really about relationships, and what you're doing on this platform here, is connecting and sharing that with other people. So kudos to you for, allowing this to just be a platform to be able to have people open up and share, because even if God forbid their life ends tomorrow, guess what? This video is going to be here forever, right?
Yeah.
Until the internet crashes and we don't know. But
But it's
um,
it's funny from what you were sharing about, like, getting into real estate. It
mm,
almost makes me laugh, or I don't know if it's a rite of passage. It seems like everybody has a, like, staying like, willing to stay on the floor story, and, like, being
mm,
able to, like, um, put yourself in a frugal position to then transition into, like, "Okay, now I'm making a bit of money. I can take care of myself at the very least." Like, what was that like for you, going from living with your sister to then leaving nursing to saying like, "Okay, real estate is something I can pursue," or like you're you're strong enough on your own to where, like, I guess your personality is like, "I'm gonna go get what I
yeah,
want, and then I'm
yeah.
gonna try this thing that works to my benefit."
So so just to be clear, even when I lived with my sister, I think it was only for like a couple months, and I still had some money. Like I've always had money. I've been always smart about money. Like if I had to, and when I tell people about like saving and being having a reserve, like literally you can do the bare minimum. Like I would probably eat rice and beans every day if I had to. I've never really had to get to that point, but there are so many sacrifices. Like again, growing up in South Central Los Angeles, we grew up around a lot of Hispanics. right? You would see a whole Hispanic family packed into a house, right? All of a sudden they would build on this house, and then you see a family move out. Like they would literally sleep in the living room on the floors, so they could help each other to raise up and be able to move into their own home or whatever the case is, right? Whereas in other cultures, especially our culture, we don't do that a lot to be able to help people. But I've always been very mindful of finances, and just been able to save. So even when I moved in with my sister, I still had some money from that $5,000 that they had sent me from the holiday loan. Even though I bought the rims, I went on the trip, I still have a little bit of money to get me through a couple months of helping her
Yeah.
until I got a job. So I was able to get a job once I got out there fairly quickly. And then I transitioned to the vacation ownership, which was the company that I started working for. I saw that people were doing the sales part. Now I was so nervous from moving from a steady check every week or every 2 weeks, however I was getting paid, to a sales based position. But I was seeing those checks and I was like $10,000, $20,000. Like, oh my God. And so I decided to do it. And that was, of course, you don't make money right away, but it was, I think I had some money between time. And so even throughout my life, like I've always been able to kind of, like immediately out of high school, I had a job. Before that period too, this is something that I did not share
Mhm.
earlier, was that I had at an early age got introduced to a guy who was selling drugs. As a result, I started selling drugs. So like from age 15 to like 18, I sold drugs. And when I say drugs, I sold crack, cocaine. I knew how to cut it. I knew the sizes. I knew how to sell it. And it wasn't like I was selling just on the street corner. The neighborhood he's kind of sold in, it was people that were familiar. So I kind of knew that. But then in my grandmother's neighborhood, I knew all those people who would smoke, because I would see them, walking down the street. And so you just have to tell one, and then they kind of get it from. So it wasn't like I had to stand on a corner or anything. It was very easy, I would say.
Mhm.
But it was still scary because you see people go to jail and stuff like that. So I always had a mentality of, I will have some money, like, but
Yeah.
without selling myself,
Right, right.
and it was something that I knew I was going to do forever. So again, once I was out of high school, I went straight into working, because I could see people getting caught up in a life of having that type of money, and I could see you either dead or in jail. And that was just not the life that I mean, it was common sense by seeing other people in the neighborhoods doing it,
Right.
and if it's easy money like that, it's just not something that would that I could see as a future for myself. So
Mm.
um I'm sorry, I forgot what the
No,
question was, but
no, you're good because you brought it back to where I was trying to get to, because it's like, in mentioning growing up in a rough environment and making the choices that you're able to make, you still were able to pull the positives out of that. Not
mm,
encouraging anyone to go sell drugs, because it's like that's not a life you want to live, but it's like
right.
knowing that a lot of people will do it to get the money. It's like in getting the money, you were able to make a determination between like, okay, I can continue to do this and this is where I'm going to end up, or I can take advantage of a better opportunity where I don't put myself in this amount of risk and then go do something else. So whenever you said initially like, oh, I got the $5,000 check and it allowed me to do this and that, like
Mhm.
I figured maybe you were saying the bad decision was like taking on that loan and spending it immediately, but like you mentioned, you didn't spend it all, and I'm
Yeah.
guessing, like, you were able to repay it, or you just wouldn't encourage people to say, like, oh, just take these loans and just
Oh no,
while
no,
out.
no. I've always had one of the greatest moments in my life. One of them was when I received an approval letter from American Express. Like I've always been a person who not struggled with credit, but I've tried to always maintain a good credit history, credit score. So again, because I was very aware of, like, I think the very first credit card I got, it was like $500 or something like that. And then, it was like, dang, you got $500. I remember one of my girlfriends was like, girl, we could go shopping. And then I thought about like the interest that you got to pay too. So even if we got it on sale, and I only paid $25 and paid it back, and then they added interest, that's like $30. So it really wasn't a deal.
Right.
You
But a
really
lot of
paying
people,
more.
to your point, a lot of people never look that far into it to be like, this isn't a deal. It's like, I'm getting money, but it's like, what's attached to the money? And it's
Right.
that
Nothing for
that's
free.
that's why I wanted to like, I'm glad you brought out that positive in a sense of like being in a bad environment, you learn to see the signs that like, although I'm able to get money, there's always something that's a trade-off attached to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. With everything, even with doing drugs, right? Right.
Mhm.
You get to a certain high, but then you want to get higher. So then what is the consequence of that? You know what I mean? Some people losing teeth, some people looking old, So and it just depends, which one is more of value to you. But at
Yeah.
the end of the day, why are you here? Why are you on this earth? Is it because for your own, oh, so that I can just go sit in a corner somewhere and just smoke my life away?
Mhm.
No, we're not here for that. This is what we're here for, is that part of relationships and connecting and bonding, and at the end of the day, doing our Father's will. So, and whatever that is, sometimes you could just be used for a second, but it's taking a good look at um the meaning of just life, and our purpose. Some people have different purposes. Maybe your purpose is to just, be there for that moment in time, but sometimes that time will be able to be passed on to other people. So
Yeah.
just as the time when I was introduced to the church and it was like, oh, okay, come to the church. I'm like, oh, that's the reason why I need to come. So,
Right. Well, I guess like to your point about being invited to the church and deciding to go, falling in love with the pastor and the message, like how did you how did it become personal for you to be like something you could receive and actually like come back and like want to learn for yourself versus it just being like, they're just in there talking and it's not
mhm.
for me.
I would say, how we're like, I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but just being as a kid and being forced to go to church, or having somebody that's like, I'm gonna pray for you, like, yeah. So it's always been somebody that's been in your life that has planted a seed.
Mm,
And so in my life, I think that seed was planted years ago, with even seeing like my grandmother having a Bible, or, when my dad had his own church.
mhm.
And even though, again, it wasn't a great reflection of what a pastor should be, there were other times where there would be like an aunt who would be like, come with me. And I remember I even had a girlfriend, we used to go, Carla, and she started going to church, and she would go to this church where she would get the Holy Spirit and she would like fall out. And I was just like, like this is my friend, so I know she's not acting,
Right,
like,
right.
this is my girl. And I'm like, okay, I didn't get that, but
Yeah.
everybody has their own relationship. And obviously that was her relationship. I still
Mhm.
to this day haven't had that where I get the tongues and the falling out. Like she would be sweating all in I was just like, what? I remember
Yeah.
going to the church and I was like fanning her with the fan, like, okay, girl. Like, but everybody has their own relationship, but I would see certain things in certain people. And I would, I remember going to like some churches and, seeing people like really feeling the spirit. But for me, when I got to Georgia, I was
Mhm.
looking for a church. And, I had a friend, I was like, girl, you gonna find a church because, they got churches all over Georgia. Like, it'll be great. And
Every block.
I remember going to one church was, I think, like a non-denominational church because for me, honestly, I'm not a very religious person. I'm more of a
Mhm.
spiritual person. I know people have their different preferences about that, but I don't really like to put people in categories. I always say, hey, if you believe that there is a God, we're good. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I always keep it simple because I don't want to get into this whole debate about religion. I say, listen, God is love. That's all it is. You know what I mean? And at the end of the day, everybody wants to be loved, feel love. Like love feels good. You know what I mean? Even if you're
Mhm.
the most negative person, if you got some more love and some more attention, like you would be great. So if we just kept it simple, you know what I mean, and strive for that same goal of having this love, like
Yeah.
it would be great, right? And so yeah, I just think that, you really shouldn't get that deep into it. So I remember, experiencing the different churches and one was like even on a Saturday where they worship to a mother god. She's in Korea, she's alive and well. And I just remember not really feeling comfortable closing my eyes and praying to the mother god. I was like, okay. And they showed you scriptures in the Bible of the bride and the husband, and
Mhm.
it kind of, the thing is you have to read the Bible for yourself, and you have to, when you're praying, you have to pray for God to lead you in that. So everybody has their own interpretation. It's what you get. It's your
Right.
own relationship,
Yeah.
and just have one.
Mhm.
And I'm not trying to preach on here, but it really has been a grounding source for just my life. So at
Yeah.
the end of the day, um I can just have something
Mm.
to believe in, hope for, live for, and it's all good. Like I can sleep good at night.
Yeah.
So when I went to this church that I currently attend, which is West End Seventh-day Adventist Church, I was just visiting with a friend, and I remember I hadn't been really to a church in a while because I had started experiencing these different churches, and I was just like, and the message was, do you still want to follow me? And when I tell you, I had never experienced this in my life where I just sat there and tears were just flowing down my face because I hadn't really been to church. And the message was just hitting on home for me because it was like, really following him versus things that are going on in the world where you get so lost into these things, time just going by and what are we doing here? What is your purpose here? And we're all searching for that. We're all searching for what our purpose is and what we're, destined for. Love, relationships, whatever the case is. So
Yeah. Man, just gotta let that breathe for a minute because I guess to your point, it's like for for that relationship or the conversation to be personal, I guess it's gotta mean something to you. And I was gonna say, don't don't feel bad about if you're coming off as preachy because you're not. You're just expressing your experience and sharing that. And if anybody's been preachy, it's probably been me. But um, the thing, like, so from that time that you started attending that church, like what was that? What was the follow up like? Was it just like you enjoyed it and you're like, "Hey, let me try going again. Let me just
it's
see
so
where this leads to."
It's awesome that you asked that question, because when I did start attending, I was I was at a point in my life where I was tired of that definition of repeating the same thing and expecting a different outcome. Like I was in a relationship and I think the relationship was coming to an end. The guy had a drinking problem, and what I didn't realize was that the whole time that I was pointing the finger at him, there's another finger pointing at myself. And I was like, oh, I got one too. I'm just not as bad as him, but I got one too, you know? And so I was like, I was at a point where I was just tired of everything. The group of people that I was hanging around with and the things that I was doing, it just wasn't very meaningful. Like it was just a life of just going out and just, you know, partying, and it was no substance, right? And I was just so tired, and I was getting ready to come out of this relationship, and a friend that I worked with, you know, had invited me and my boyfriend at the time to the church, but my boyfriend, he wasn't interested. He was just like, you know, he went one time to another church with me because, you know, I asked him to, but he was like all on his phone. He just wasn't engaged. And
Mhm.
um so he didn't go with me to that church, and that's when I felt that. However, I continued to go to I went on a it was like a Wednesday night Bible study time, and it was me and a coworker at the time. And I was like, "Ooh," I was like, "I like this," you know. I was like, "So you go every Wednesday?" I was like, "Let's go." And actually what happened was I was breaking up with the boyfriend at the time, and I really just didn't want to go home. And what happened was the guy who had invited me to go to the church, I had invited him to go with me to this gala that I had gotten invited to. It was my first time going. It was the Martin Luther King Salute to Greatness, like, award gala. And I remember the lady, when she gave me the tickets from my job, she was like, listen, whatever you do, bring a date. I'm tired of giving these, because I don't know if people from somewhere else maybe listen to this. In Georgia, there is a whole saying that to every one man, there's about 5 or 10 women, you know. So in Georgia, I guess it was more of a challenge to have, like, you know, a man. So she said she would give out these tickets. It would always be just a bunch of ladies at the table. She was like, bring your cousin, bring your brother. I don't care. Just bring a date. Right. And I was getting ready to break up with this guy. And so I invited my coworker, like, can you go with me? Cause, you know, and so I remember him coming by my desk and saying, hey, I'm thinking of wearing a bow tie. What color are you wearing? And I was like, oh, I was wearing black. I said, I'll go with you to go pick out the bow tie,
Mhm.
because again, I didn't want to go home. And he was like, well, I'm going to Bible study tonight. You want to come? And I was like, sure, I'll go to Bible study, you know. So we went to go pick out the time, went to Bible study. That's when the message was, do you still want to follow me? And I was just like, oh God, I couldn't even stop the tears. Like they were just flowing, like just flowing from the music to, and this was just a Bible study, you know. And I was just like, wow. And I was like, you go every Wednesday? I was like, let's go. Cause you know, my lease was going to be up the end of March. So me and the guy was still living together, even though we
Mhm.
were not together. It was a 2 bedroom. So I was able to sleep in one room. He was in the other, you know, it's like room. And I'm good with breaking up in relationships. I'll be like, you know, we can just be, so I've never been like an angry type of person. And I give tribute because I did have my father in my life. So I
Mm.
never really was like the girl that would be like, oh, we got to stay together. I was always going to be okay. You know, I felt like I was a runaway bride for the longest. But so we started going every Wednesday to Bible study. And then he was like, you know, once I went, I realized that they go to church on the Sabbath, and it was a 7-day Adventist church. And then I was like, oh, y'all go to church on Saturday. I was like, okay, this is interesting. So, you know, I read in the Bible, you know, what it said about that. And then I started taking courses, and I fell in love with the church. But lo and behold, it was like a whole bunch of like stuff that came with it, you know, like
Mhm.
as I was developing my relationship with God, I was like, you know what? I'm done with everything. I was like, it's gonna be me and the Lord. I was like, he gonna be my boyfriend. Jesus is my boyfriend. Like I was just so tired. I was so focused on this relationship. I had started back in school to get my bachelor's degree. And so I was and then I was going to church on a Saturday. And then it all came that there was like some drama in the church, you know, that because my friend who invited me, he had just lost his wife maybe a few months before. And And then I was going with he was the one who invited me. But again, I was not interested in him. Like he wasn't interested in me. He just lost his wife. But then there was all these rumors going around that we were dating. And I was like, who are you dating? Like he didn't date me, like because I was so not interested and he was so not interested. It was like a perfect, like, you know, people for us to be together but not together because it occupied our times and our mind without us being together. And then the more I did come, the more we end up, getting closer, and that's who my husband is today. But but initially, like, it just was not my, when I tell you he was so far off of my radar, like he was never like my type of guy, because of how, one, my lifestyle, period. And he has always been in the church, a very a man of God. And him and his wife both attended the church for like, almost 20 years. And here I come in the church. I was like, who is this girl? So yeah, and again, a church is not a place where it's like perfect people. So I was so thankful that God placed me where he placed me at the time that he did, because had I been younger, had I been hadn't been through the things that I had been through, I wouldn't have been prepared for that moment. So I literally had my blinders on. I literally did only go for the word, and then I was out, so it didn't really affect me as much. I mean, I would hear it, and then it kind of made me even more guarded because I'm more of a people person. I'm more of a transparent person. And so then when people were coming up to me, giving their congratulations, I'm like, I don't know. Because
This was
I
when the
think that I
rumors
would have
were
preferred to
starting.
deal. I would prefer to deal with drunk people in the club because they honest,
Yeah,
versus
yeah.
some of the people that's in the church, to be honest with you,
True, true. Talk
because you
about
just
it.
never know where they're coming from. Like, and
Yeah,
I've never been that person because I've just always been very honest and very just transparent. Like my grandmother was the same way. So it's like, this is what it is.
yeah.
We don't make anything, make you to believe anything different. And it was kind of challenging in my life for that. But I felt like he prepared me at the right moment for that situation. And of course, over the years, we've been married now for 7 years.
Mm,
It's gotten better. There
mm.
may be some people who still despise or don't even believe some of the things that I say, as if one of the things, we were never together before.
Right, right.
um, those that time. But it's people are people. One of the things that I'm learning is that you just have to meet people where they are and try to rise above it, and
Yeah,
just move forward and let your light shine, regardless to the negative stuff.
yeah. It's funny when you were saying people were coming up and congratulating you, I was like, was that the people starting stuff, or was this after the fact of getting married? And you're like,
Yes.
weren't you the one that was over here starting something?
Yeah, I feel like God really gave me a spirit of discernment when it comes to people. And some, it may be off a little bit. Like one lady I remember just like a few months ago, she sent me this text and she was like, hey, you just came on my mind. I'm just letting you know that I'm praying for you. And I was just like, she was one of the ones that I felt like I wasn't really, like I felt like it was always like kind of a fake situation. And it
Yeah.
was crazy because I was like reading this devotion during a time where we were talking about like forgiveness. And I was like, oh God, I gotta forgive this lady, right? Because we're always a work in progress. Like I'm
Yeah.
never gonna be the holiest of holy. There is never a more perfect person on this earth than Jesus. So like you can believe what you want to believe, but there is not a perfect person on this earth, and I'm not one of them.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I am always striving to do is to be a better person. So I read this devotion. I was like, oh God, I gotta forgive this lady, So especially gonna send me, because I never responded to her. So a few days went by and I was just like, I just expressed how she made me feel when I came into the church.
Mm,
And she was like, she called me immediately. And the sincerity in her voice was like, she explained all the things she was actually dealing with. And
mm,
because I never really got a chance to connect with her, I felt a different energy. But I didn't know that she was going through so much in her own personal life and
Right.
her own personal stuff that she wasn't even concerned about the stuff that we were dealing with. And I was like, oh my gosh, she had a sick child. She had all these different things. And so I was like, oh, and she was like, but I really am this person that'd be like, hey, and I always thought it was a fake hey.
Right, right.
And so I was like, okay. But there are times when I don't get it right, but for the most part, God has blessed me with some really great people in my life that outside of me not having family, my friends are my family, and the people that God placed in my life are those that, I feel like we learn from each other and we are connected for life. So I don't go through relationships where, oh, okay, I don't talk to this person no more. Like I've just been very fortunate to have people that are lifelong friends, family. So yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's funny because I met your husband before I met you through the church or like the men's prayer line, and finding out about them and just being like, oh, okay, there's a group of men that get together throughout the week and just talk about real life and then communicate also like in the spiritual sense. It's like I'm curious to know what that's like, because I grew up as a preacher's kid, and I had the being forced to go to church, but also
Mhm.
like once graduating high school, going to college, trying to figure out like what does this actually mean to me versus like being forced
Yeah.
to go. And it's like going to different denominations and being like, okay. And I remember somebody in college, it was a girl that was in either in one of my classes or just like it was a I started out at what you would consider a community college. It was like a sister college to tech, and then I transferred over to tech. And maybe I was wooed by her because she was an attractive young lady, but I remember her telling me something about like, oh, like there's the sister goddess or like a female god or something like that. I was listening, but I was like, I know I'm being captivated by your looks, but I don't know what you're saying right now. I'm
Yeah.
kind of like nodding, but like the wheels in my brain are still turning a little bit, but I
Right.
definitely had to ask questions of myself. And even recently, it's like just even thinking of like, okay, maybe I should find somewhere to go and like take part in, like they say, fellowship. And it's like that's what the line was for me a lot, but kind of realizing that there may be an importance to finding something close to me and not just rely on that to be like the end all be all.
Mm-hmm. Yep, yep, yep. Because that's again, if I feel like if you don't have some sort of like I think like a foundation of something that you believe in, then
Mhm.
you'll fall for anything.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
think that's the saying as well. So I prefer if you, believe in something because other than that, like you just have no sense of like, direction or path or
yeah.
um I can't say for all because I have not lived that life, but for me, just the things that have happened in my life and for the journey and the things that I have seen,
Mhm.
they have been real. And I always focus on transparency and things that are just real because I didn't believe a lot of things, so
Yeah,
I share what has happened in my life, and it has definitely been all a tribute to just that journey of that relationship with Christ above all other relationships. And I'm still learning, and I'm still growing every day, and I'm still sinning, and I'm still falling every other day.
yeah,
So, it's not about being perfect, but it's about being, just used and,
yeah.
you know, yeah.
That I think um whether you know it or not, the life living your life in the way that you live it, it speaks volume. Because like I was saying, in the way that I learned of you being a real estate agent and wanting to get into real estate at the time, um, I'd heard an interview, I think it was before I thought about the real estate thing, about your husband and like understanding like, okay, this is his character and this is um this was how his previous wife described him before she passed, and this is how his current wife described him, and like that admiration, I was like, okay, wow, okay, another woman sees she has this respect for her husband. And then when I mentioned like, "Hey guys, I'm thinking about getting into real estate," and Ryan mentioned like, "Yeah, you should talk to Trey and she can help you out. She's in the Atlanta area," and then starting to look and like you talk about having that discernment and doing your due diligence and just being a genuine person having those one-to-one interactions. I would have never guessed like podcasting wasn't your thing, like seeing you do like a podcast before, but like you say, it's like being able to have those interactions face to face is something that I've appreciated about you because it's in me wanting so much so to be like, oh, I want to go into real estate. I'm excited. It's like you kind of reminded me, hey, you need to have your ducks in a row here because like
Mhm.
I went away to the conference in January, end of January 2020, and I was like, I'm going back to Atlanta and I'm buying a house. And
Mhm.
then you're like, okay, so where are your pay stubs for the past few months? And I was like, well, they're coming. I know I applied for this job with FEMA and they said that like I was supposed to be working since October, but like the way that it works is like they're supposed to deploy you. And then they said I was gonna go to Iowa maybe, and I don't
Yeah,
know. And then
yeah.
like I got a call within like the next 2 days to like, okay, you're going to Puerto Rico. And I was like, okay, that's let me wrap my head around that real quick, get a bag together. I'm gonna go there for a year. I don't know how long, but just having that come down moment for a minute to be like, no, we're not we're not getting a house right now. And it's like
Yeah, we're not right. Let's take
I
a step.
was I was like, but you said and I was like, wait, no, she didn't say that this was promised. It's like, no, you've got to follow
Yeah,
the steps. And it was
process.
like, okay. And
Yeah.
then who would have known like 2 months later, the whole world just shuts down and
Oh
like
my God.
nobody's doing anything.
I couldn't believe it. I didn't even know what to do. I was like, wait a minute. So, and then realized people were still selling real estate because you always need a place to stay. I was like, wait a minute, they're still going outside. Got it together, but it
Yeah.
has definitely been a platform where I'm able to really connect with people. I don't really strive to, like sales. Of course, everybody wants money, but I've had the money. So, I mean, and I've always had money, but for me, it's more about the personal relationships and being able to, um, I would say, connect with families. And one of the things I was thinking about the other day when I was talking to a group and one found out one of the ladies had just bought a house. I'm thinking like, who she knows? You know, and I was slightly offended. I was just like, I came home and that night is so amazing how like, when you stop to take yourself out of it, and really be like, I was like, why did you use me? And then it was like the spirit was like, because that's not who you were here to help. You know what I mean? That's not the person that you needed to be connected to, And I was just like, oh, and it was so clear, and I was just like, oh, okay. Like, because I really want to have like myself in it. I was just
Yeah.
like, oh, like, and I literally, and that wasn't the first time. Like, I've been mad at like several people, and literally I was sitting there like, I gotta stop doing that. And I was just
Yeah.
like, why did I feel like that? And it was just like, because that's not the person that you're supposed to connect with. Like,
Mm.
get yourself together. The people,
Yeah.
and it's crazy because like right after I have that moment, like I feel like I get blessed with so much more. Like I remember there was one family that I was helping, and they wasn't even qualified for a lot, And it's so crazy because from the time that you were qualified to like now, like the cost has gone up. So like even like 150 to 200 range, like now homes are like 200, so it's nice if you get something that's probably around like 150, like it's probably just a shell of a house.
Yeah.
And so it needs definitely a lot of work. But anyways, this one particular family, they were looking for something around like one something. And I told them that on Saturday is my only day that well, actually, I didn't tell them at first. Usually I try to tell people in the beginning, like I don't go on Saturday
Mhm.
um, because of my religion. However, I will still, respond to a message because everybody again has their own different thing, but I just don't physically go and show a home. I may even pay somebody to go and open a door, but I don't go and I don't open a door. And I remember this family, I didn't tell them up front because we were literally going through the weekday. And then on one particular day, they were like, well, we can't go on Sunday because they were Jehovah's Witness. And I was like, oh, okay. So they were like, well, this is not gonna work. And they literally like fired me. They were like, thank you for your services, but bye-bye. But I was just like, oh God, you know what I mean? But it's so funny because right after that, I got like a client that was looking for like a $500,000 home. And I was like, they were qualified for like 180 or something. And it was like, because I stuck with, just, okay, this is what I do and this is who I am. It was like, I felt like he just blessed me abundantly more. And I was just like, oh, okay. And I told them immediately, like, I was like, oh, just I don't work. They was like, oh, we don't go on Saturdays either because and then I was like, it's just so crazy. And, a couple of times that I've done that and I'll say, hey, I don't work on Saturday. They're like, we don't either, and not even that they go to my same church. It just
Yeah.
so happens to happen. So that's how I kind of tied in, okay, these are the people that I'm supposed to connect with, and it's just been, it's been a blessing. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work. I have a lot of people that say they want to get into the business. And, when I met you, like I was doing so much studying because I was so nervous and I wanted to make sure I knew everything.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until I actually got busy that and you're still learning, but
Yeah. Yeah.
it's just it's a definitely an industry where you are always working and you're always learning,
Yeah.
but it's rewarding too with the connections. So, yep.
That's awesome. I guess just a quick question on that. Like, what was the experience like through the pandemic and then just as things kind of started loosening back up a bit?
With the pandemic, once I realized that people were still buying homes, I got back into the business and it was so fast. So whereas I think with you and I, when we first started, I was able to say, hey, we can go out on Friday. We can see this home, this home, this home, where it started speeding up. We're like, today the house went on the market. We got to go today, like we can't wait till tomorrow,
Yeah.
and it was crazy. So it was like my first year in sales, I made only $5,000 and I only had one transaction. And then the next year, which was I think 20, well, actually, because I didn't really do any much in 2020 because I was still working
Yeah.
corporate
Mm.
part-time. 2020, 2020, I did one sale.
Mhm.
2021, I had like 13 transactions and I sold $4.3 million worth of real estate. And then
I'm
now we're
just
in
gonna say that
2026.
casually. Just like it's like
Trust me,
I
there are
just
people
went
that
from
have made
1 to
much more.
13. Right,
Yeah,
but I'm saying like for you, for like a
yeah.
personal achievement, I know you don't want to brag on yourself, but I'll I'll
No,
give you a
and that's
hand.
not even like a brag because it's people that have done way more. When I look at them, like, oh, they're like,
Right,
oh.
but I'm saying
They do
like
13 like in 1 month. Like,
right,
oh,
but I'm saying like the progression to go from
yeah,
1 to more
yeah.
than 1. It's like
It
it's
was a
still
lot of
something.
work though. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a lot of work. It was a lot of being in my car, which brought me to this year where I was like, okay, I don't want to be that overwhelmed
Mm.
like I was last year. And my goal though last year was my husband's 50th was
Mm.
that year. So
Yeah.
I really wanted to take him on a trip because again, he is a wonderful husband. And so he loves Hawaii. And I wanted to do like this whole Hawaii 50 themed birthday. So we did like 17 days in Hawaii where we island hopped
Yeah.
from different islands. And I really wanted to just be able to treat him. So literally, I just really wanted to get all this money so that I could just like treat him to this trip. And so that was my goal. So this year I don't really have a goal, but God is still kind of blessed. So I won't have that many this year because I didn't really want to overwhelm myself with
Mm.
a quantity, but I need to still make sure I have things in the pipeline. So if you know anybody that's looking to buy or sell, And yet.
Yeah.
So yeah, but business has still been good. Is now cooling off where I don't have to go today when a house goes on the market.
Yeah.
I actually have one house that's listed, and I had a couple closings last week and the week before.
Mhm.
And then I have people that I'm working with. So now it's just, I'm telling buyers, it's a better time, but the interest rate has now increased.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like it depends on how you want to look at it, because the prices are not going down.
Right.
They are, and if they're going down, it's only because like I had to reduce the price on my home because we
Mhm.
were, a little up there.
Yeah.
But you have to think about what the interest rate is, what the monthly payment would be for a client, and then the overall cost. So if you can bring the cost down, it will bring their mortgage down
Right.
to help them have a better mortgage payment.
Got you.
Yeah.
I guess with that, do you think 2023 is going to be much different as you're trying to predict or forecast what's going to come up?
Well, I think it'll definitely, because builders have been building a lot.
Mm.
I think it'll still be about the same. Hopefully the interest rates don't go any higher.
Mhm.
But who knows? We got these wars that are going on. And just so much. I have the family that I'm selling their home now, they're getting ready to pack up and move to Africa because they're
Mm.
like, listen, America is just, you can take the money and just pretty much be rich there. And, they bought their house last year at like three something, and they already got up 100 grand in equity. So they're going to take that money
Mhm.
and live like kings and queens in Africa.
Yeah.
So, it's not a bad thing. So it just depends on, nobody can predict what the market will do.
Right.
Um, because you just never know. It won't be a 2008 episode
Mhm.
where you're going to have a whole bunch of foreclosures.
Mhm.
Um, there will be, some sort of shift that levels it out, which now we're in a pretty much, where we can get some concessions from like a seller, but
Mhm.
the prices are what they are now. Our house
Right.
when we bought it in 2016 was like, 170, we on a golf court now, it's like, 300,000,
Mhm.
um, it ain't never going back down to that price, never.
Right.
So, it's just a little challenging now for, others, but then also pay raises will increase. So
Yeah,
it'll level off,
that makes sense. And I
yeah.
I guess with that, how can people get in touch with you or listen to your podcast and connect with you offline?
Also, I do have a women's prayer line that we do. We haven't been able to do the podcast portion of it. So maybe I need to connect with you so you can teach me how we can do that. But we do have a women's prayer line because we kind of started something that was similar to the men's, but we only do like Tuesday and Wednesday. And ours is a little different where we didn't have like an open platform because we didn't want it to be, how women can be.
Men can be like that sometimes too.
Yeah, and I'm more like because I grew up with boys, I'm kind of boyish, she a little bit. I may look feminine, but I'd be like, "Mm." So we have a very structured line where we just come in, we do, 6 a.m. and we're probably off about like 6:20. We do prayer, devotional, and then we have a closing prayer. Any prayer requests are sent to our email address, but it's called our prayer group is called Prayer Partners,
Mhm.
because sometimes you just need somebody to pray with, and that's a whole nother podcast we can have, where I got into having a prayer partner, and then we expanded it to different women because I started praying with other women, and I
Gotcha.
didn't want to be with these perfect prayers, but now we became like prayer warriors. So we also have a YouTube that's called Prayer Warriors. I think it's a women winning war through prayer, um, or winning war through prayer.
Mhm.
One of the names was taken.
Gotcha.
So we do have that YouTube, and I am here locally in Georgia as a real estate broker advisor, And they can contact me at 404-964-9185, or email Trey Realty, or they can contact you to contact me.
Gotcha. Do you do
Leave a
social media?
message. Yeah. Social media, Trey Realty on Instagram. I suck at social media, so please bear with me, guys. I'm trying to do better. And then Trevana Trey Houston on Facebook. I'm more of a Facebook, but I'm trying to do better.
Yeah. I mean,
Pray for me.
you'll get it. I know for me, I followed this is Nikki Saunders on Instagram, and just following some of her tips that she posts and some
Mhm.
of the lessons that she would do through Brief University back in the day, and
Mhm.
like through Beast Mode Digital. I think now it's deeper than the brand, but like she's really good about giving like vignettes of tips and things that you can do in a sense. But even
Mhm.
for podcasting, I found that it's been easy to just um make it fun, or find a way to just do, maybe like front load a little bit, do a couple at a time, or find like Saturday, Sunday on the weekends to record, to be able to like do that, and then be able to pull from that to just be like, okay, this is what can go for the week or for the month. That way it's not
Yeah.
like you're constantly under pressure to just like produce. And
Yeah.
like, I listened to a message from Dr. Eric Thomas yesterday, and it just talking about not being a provider or not being a producer, which almost seems like it's counterintuitive to what especially a lot of men would relate to, is like, oh, I'm a producer, I'm a provider, I'm a priest. It's like,
Mhm.
yeah, like this is the thing that affirms me. But like, being able to hear that message within the context of the text that he shared, I was like, okay, I got to come back to that one and listen to it again, and maybe keep it on replay throughout this
Yeah.
week, to just be like, you got to like let go of some of those things. But I'll send that some I'll send some of those things your way if it's helpful, and we can definitely talk offline. But I think you're well on your way.
All right. Well, thank you. I mean, and even with the content, like sometimes I have it, but it's just posting it, because then you have to respond and I
Yeah,
don't know, like it.
not always. Sometimes you just got to post and ghost, and then maybe come back on a weekday for like an
Yeah,
hour or something, and just
yeah,
you'll figure it out.
yeah. And when you're busy, you're busy. So sometimes I just be like, when I'm free, I'm just like to be free. So
Sure.
I'll figure it out. You're right. I'm gonna get
Yeah.
it together. I'm gonna get it
And
together.
the as promised, the last question I'd like to ask you is from the first question I asked you. Are you still who you said you were?
Of course. We've talked about it throughout this entire episode. Like none of the credit goes to me, it all goes to him. And again, I'm always striving to be better. And I'm just like you said, we're gonna talk offline so you can help me get better with the social media. Look.
Awesome. Thank you
Yeah, so
so
thank
much
you for
for the
having me.
you're very welcome. Thank you so much for being on the podcast and allowing me to have some of your time.
Absolutely. Well, you have a great one and we'll be in touch, and pray that God blesses you abundantly with this podcast and those people that will come after me on it.
Thank you.